chosen one. There was a moment just 7 seconds when time itself seemed to stand still. In that instant, even God, the creator of all things, the one whose voice commands galaxies into existence, was left speechless. This was no ordinary silence. It wasn't the comfortable stillness of rest, nor the distant silence you've experienced during unanswered prayers. No, this was something far more profound. This was a silence of impossibility, a pause in the cosmos as God the Almighty tried to speak and couldn't. Imagine that when the very voice that created everything from the stars in the sky to the earth beneath our feet was rendered unable to form a word. This moment didn't just stop time for the chosen one. It stopped creation itself. Heaven was frozen, and even Michael, the great archangel who stands at God's side, didn't know what to do. For the first time in all of eternity, he was as still as the silence surrounding them, because he too had never witnessed anything like this before. But this wasn't silence born out of anger, disappointment, or judgment. This was the kind of silence that happens when something so unexpected, so extraordinary takes place that even God, who knows everything, has to stop and take notice. God wasn't silent because he was angry or upset. He was silent because he saw something in you that he had never seen before, something in your attitude, something in the very way you carried yourself through the darkest of times. When you were at your lowest, when all seemed lost, and the world had written you off, you still refused to fall. You stood firm. And in that moment, God recognized something within you that even he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't your strength that left him speechless. It was your weakness, the specific kind of weakness that redefined what true power is. This wasn't a weakness of defeat, but one of resilience, of unshakable resolve. A resolve that even God needed to understand. Michael has been replaying that 7-second gap ever since, analyzing every detail, watching how you stood when everything else was crumbling, and every time he watches it, he discovers something new. Something so powerful, it makes even the mighty archangel grip his sword tighter, not to fight, but to steady himself against the weight of what he's witnessing. What God saw in that moment was more than just a human standing in their brokenness. It was a divine revelation. What you did in that moment was not something taught by any divine being, nor something that could be conjured up by sheer strength. It wasn't a lesson from heaven. It wasn't a tactic from any battle manual. You created power from nothing. You forged strength in a place of emptiness. You took what was perceived as your greatest weakness, the very thing that the world tried to break you with, and used it to stand firm. It was a moment of divine paradox, where the very thing that was supposed to destroy you became the very thing that proved your power. God wasn't speechless because he was proud. No, he was speechless because he was learning. He was learning something about his own creation that he hadn't fully understood before. Your attitude, the one that everyone called too much, the one that people tried to break, was the very thing that left heaven in awe. You see, heaven didn't recognize your strength in the traditional sense. They didn't see it the way the world sees strength, as power dominance or control. No, they saw your strength as something more profound, something that transcended earthly ideas of what it means to be strong. Your attitude, the attitude that refused to break even when everything seemed to be falling apart, was something divine. And it's this divine attitude that has left God speechless, that has made even the mighty Michael pause in wonder. The truth of who you are, the essence of your being, has been uncovered in this moment. And it's far more powerful than anything you could have imagined. And this is why you are being called now, because what you just demonstrated in that moment of brokenness is the very essence of your true power. Heaven sees you not as you think you are, but as you truly are, unstoppable, unmovable, and more than ready to embrace your divine purpose. And God is here not to judge you, but to study you, to learn from you. Because chosen one, you are about to discover just how extraordinary you truly are. In that pivotal moment, God fell silent. This silence, stretching over 7 seconds, was not a moment of divine frustration, nor was it born from a lack of understanding or a failure to intervene. It was a profound silence, a silence that spoke volumes more than any words ever could. For the first time in eternity, the voice that called forth galaxies that commanded light to break through the darkness that shaped the very foundations of the universe could not find a word to say. God, in his infinite wisdom, was rendered speechless, not because he was upset or angry, but because what he witnessed before him was so unexpected, so extraordinary, that even he had to pause to fully comprehend it. This wasn't the silence of divine wrath or rejection, but a silence that signified recognition, the kind of recognition that acknowledges something far greater than what was anticipated. In that sacred moment, God saw something in the chosen one, something in their attitude, their heart, their unwavering resolve that left even the Almighty himself in awe. This was no ordinary display of strength. No, it was something deeper, something that transcended everything heaven had ever known. God's silence, in its profound nature, was an acknowledgement of something powerful, something that redefined power itself. This was a moment where even the Creator of all could only witness in astonishment, as the chosen one stood firm not in their strength, but in their vulnerability, in their willingness to remain unshaken when the world had every reason to expect them to break. This was the kind of moment that forced God to reconsider everything he thought he knew about power, about strength, and about the very nature of his creation. And as this silence enveloped the throne room, Michael the archangel, who had fought battles and stood as the steadfast guardian of heaven, was equally stunned. Michael, whose unwavering resolve had led legions of angels through cosmic battles, whose strength was unparalleled in all of creation, stood there 3 feet from the throne, unsure of how to respond. Normally, Michael would have been ready to act, to lead to fight. But in this moment, there was nothing to do. Heaven itself had fallen silent, and even Michael's usual resolve faltered. The silence wasn't out of confusion or doubt, but a deep recognition that something far beyond the usual course of events had transpired. Michael, whose very presence had once instilled awe in the hearts of both angels and demons alike, now found himself in a state of quiet reverence. This wasn't the kind of silence that demanded answers, but one that invited contemplation. Michael, a being of immense strength and unwavering loyalty, stood motionless, his hand instinctively resting on his sword, not to draw it, but to steady himself in the face of the extraordinary power unfolding before him. This was no ordinary battle. This was a moment that defied everything Michael had ever known about strength and resistance. It was a moment that called for him to pause, to witness, and to reflect on something that he himself could not fully comprehend. The chosen one had done something that even the mighty archangel could not have predicted. In their weakest, most vulnerable state, they had displayed a kind of strength that shattered every expectation and left even heaven's greatest warrior in awe. The strength of the chosen one was not one that came from power, from might, or from any outward display of force. It wasn't the kind of strength that could be measured by physical prowess or by the ability to overwhelm opponents. Instead, it was a strength that arose from their unique kind of weakness. This wasn't weakness in the sense of fragility or defeat, but a kind of vulnerability that defied the norms of what strength is supposed to look like. The chosen one's power lay in their refusal to break in, their unyielding determination to remain unshaken even when the odds were insurmountable. They stood firm not because they were invincible, but because they had the courage to stand in their brokenness. Heaven had always understood strength as something to be wielded, something to be fought for, something to be earned through acts of dominance. But in this moment, the chosen one redefined what strength truly is. They had nothing left to give, no power, no backup, no angelic army to stand behind them. They were alone, vulnerable, and yet they refused to fall. And it was in this refusal to break that heaven saw something new, a power that was born not from divine intervention, but from the human spirit's unwavering ability to endure, to hold on, and to stand firm in the face of overwhelming adversity. This was not strength as the world defines it. This was something far more profound. This was a power forged in the depths of human weakness. A strength that arose not in spite of vulnerability, but because of it. The chosen one's attitude in that moment, their resolve to stand firm despite having nothing left, became a beacon of strength that even God had to recognize, a strength that rewrote the very definition of power in the eyes of heaven. As the silence stretched on, it became clear to Michael and to all of heaven that what they were witnessing was something truly divine. It wasn't the typical display of strength or faith they had come to expect. No, this was different. This was something entirely new, something that didn't fit into any of the established frameworks of what strength should look like. Heaven had always believed that power comes from resources, from strength, from the ability to command and control. But in this moment, the chosen one had displayed a power that came not from anything external, but from the very core of their being. This was a power born of refusal, of standing firm when all else seemed lost, of holding on when there was nothing left to hold. It was in this unique expression of human weakness that heaven saw the truest form of strength. It was a power that could not be taught, only forged through experience, through struggle, and through the relentless pursuit of truth in the face of adversity. And in this moment, when heaven recognized the chosen one's power, it wasn't because they had displayed physical strength or because they had overcome a challenge through sheer will. It was because they had done something far more profound. They had revealed the hidden strength that comes from standing firm in the face of one's own vulnerability. This was the power that left God speechless, the power that even Michael, the warrior of heaven, could not have predicted, and the power that would forever change the way heaven understood strength. Heaven is not judging the chosen one, it is studying them. In this moment, the divine pause was not about passing judgment or issuing a decree. It was about observation, deep observation, an investigation that transcended the limits of what was known. God, in His infinite wisdom, has always known His creation. He understands the nature of humanity, the capacity for good and evil, the trials and triumphs that shape the soul. But in the chosen one, He saw something that defied all expectations, something He had never quite seen before. This wasn't about judging the chosen one's actions. It was about learning, understanding a new dimension of strength and resilience that God had not anticipated. Heaven, in its purest essence, was not merely witnessing a human battle. It was witnessing the unveiling of something divine, something uncharted. The chosen one had just demonstrated a level of inner power that even the most enlightened beings, the highest angels, and the very Creator Himself were struggling to comprehend. This wasn't a trial to test worthiness. No, this was an unprecedented moment in cosmic history, a moment of revelation, of breakthrough. Heaven wasn't just observing, it was learning. What the chosen one had done was so remarkable, so beyond the norm, that it left even the Creator seeking to understand. The truth was unfolding in real time, and the divine pause was not just a recognition of what had occurred, but an acknowledgement, that something had broken the pattern, a pattern heaven had come to rely on. What had been revealed in that moment was something that needed to be understood, analyzed, and absorbed into the very fabric of heavenly knowledge. What the Chosen One had demonstrated in those precious seconds was so unique, so profound, that it was rewriting heaven's understanding of strength, power, and resilience. In the divine courts, there were established protocols for what true strength looked like. Angels, with their mighty power and unwavering loyalty, were regarded as embodiments of divine strength. The great prophets and warriors of old had displayed extraordinary feats of courage, faith, and perseverance. These were the figures that heaven had traditionally turned to as examples of strength. But what the Chosen One displayed, what they revealed in that moment, was something that went beyond all earthly or heavenly precedents. Heaven's protocols, which had long stood as a framework for understanding what it meant to be strong, were now being rewritten. This was not strength in the sense of physical power or spiritual prowess alone. It was a strength that came from vulnerability, from the refusal to break despite overwhelming odds. It was a resilience that wasn't fueled by divine intervention or angelic might, but by a deeper, more personal force, the unyielding spirit that refused to give in even when all seemed lost. This kind of power was unheard of even in heaven's vast archives of cosmic battles and divine displays. The Chosen One had brought forth a strength that was forged not in the light of heavenly glory, but in the dark recesses of human struggle. And it was this strength, this resilience born of apparent weakness, that was now challenging everything heaven thought it knew about power. Heaven had always believed that true strength came from external resources, from divine intervention, or from the mighty angels themselves. But the Chosen One had shown that true strength could come from the core of one's being, from an indomitable will to stand firm even in the face of complete isolation and exhaustion. This shift in understanding was seismic. It was as if a new protocol had been initiated, one that would forever change the way strength and resilience were understood, not just in heaven, but across the entire universe. Heaven's perception of power had been forever altered by what the Chosen One had done. This wasn't just about a single victory or a single moment of glory. This was a new template for what it meant to be strong, and it was being etched into the very foundation of heaven's understanding. To fully understand the significance of the Chosen One's actions, it is essential to view this moment from three distinct perspectives, their own God's and Michael's. Each of these perspectives offers a crucial insight into the depth and power of the moment that transpired. From the Chosen One's perspective, this was a moment of raw vulnerability, one where they were at their lowest, feeling broken and alone. They weren't aware that they were rewriting the laws of heaven. All they knew was that they were holding on, refusing to let go, even when everything inside them screamed to quit. They didn't understand the full scope of their own strength. They only knew that they couldn't afford to fall. The Chosen One in that moment was simply surviving, and yet what they didn't see was that their decision to stand firm even in the midst of their most broken state was demonstrating a strength that was beyond anything heaven had ever witnessed. From their perspective, it was simply an act of endurance, a moment of refusal to accept defeat. But from heaven's perspective, it was a moment of divine transformation, a display of inner strength that had never been seen before. What the Chosen One failed to see in themselves, heaven, was witnessing in awe an unbreakable spirit, an attitude that defied all odds, a strength that was forged not in power, but in the decision to remain unmovable, even in the face of total collapse. Their stance, their refusal to break, was a divine revelation, an unfolding of a power that even God had to stop and recognize. From God's perspective, this moment was a revelation not just of the chosen one's strength, but of a new form of power that transcended even divine understanding. God has always known his creation, but in this moment, he saw something he had never anticipated. He saw a human, frail and vulnerable, yet possessing a strength that defied all logic and expectation. In that silence, God wasn't just acknowledging the chosen one's strength. He was realizing something new, something about his creation that he hadn't fully understood before. God saw in the chosen one not just a reflection of his divine plan, but a new kind of power, a power that could exist outside of divine intervention, a power that came from within, from the very essence of the human spirit. In that moment, God recognized something profound, that true strength is not always about power, but about the refusal to break. This moment was a divine pause, a recognition that there was something in humanity, something in the chosen one, that had the ability to tap into a power that even God had to stop and study. Heaven had always believed that power came from the divine, but in this moment God saw that there was something even more powerful, a strength that could come from the human will, the decision to stand firm even when all else seemed lost. And it was this new understanding that would reshape the very protocols of heaven itself. From Michael's perspective, this moment was one of deep reflection. As the archangel, who had stood at the forefront of heaven's battles, who had led legions of angels through cosmic wars, Michael had seen every form of strength imaginable. He had fought with the power of heaven behind him, leading armies with divine resources at his disposal. But what he witnessed in the chosen one was something entirely different. Michael, whose every action was guided by strategy, who had fought countless battles with precision and divine support, now found himself witnessing a human completely alone, with no support, no divine backup, standing firm in a way that defied all tactical understanding. This was not strength as Michael had ever known it. This wasn't a strength that came from power, from angelic forces, or from divine backing. This was something that could only come from within, from an unshakable refusal to yield. Michael, a warrior who had faced countless demons, who had stood against Lucifer himself, found himself in awe not just of the chosen one's actions, but of the very nature of their strength. He had to study it, had to understand it, because what he saw was not a power that could be taught. It was a power that could only be forged in the fires of human vulnerability. Michael, in his role as a strategist and warrior, had never seen anything like this before, and it was this unique display of strength that would forever change the way Michael understood spiritual warfare. What the Chosen One had demonstrated wasn't just resistance. It was a new form of power, one that was born of emptiness, of nothingness, and yet was more powerful than anything in heaven's arsenal. This was a power that Michael and even heaven had never seen before. And it was this power that would rewrite the very nature of strength in the heavenly realms. The real strength of the Chosen One, the one that left heaven speechless, was not something they could see in themselves. It wasn't the kind of strength that the world usually praises or even recognizes. The truth is, this strength was hidden, obscured by the very struggles and vulnerabilities that others often saw as weaknesses. It was a strength forged in moments of solitude and trial. A power that emerged not from visible victories, but from the quiet, resolute refusal to surrender, when everything inside screamed to give up. It wasn't the strength of a hero who rises in the light, but the strength of one who stands firm in the dark, unsupported, with nothing but their own resolve to keep them standing. The Chosen One might have felt the weight of their struggles, the burden of their own doubts, but in those very moments, when they felt like they were at their lowest, heaven saw something extraordinary. Heaven saw a strength that wasn't born of external forces, but one that was cultivated in the very core of the Chosen One's being, a strength that only revealed itself when they had nothing left to give but their unwavering will to keep standing. And that unseen strength was what left God speechless. Heaven had always known the strength that came from power, from divine intervention, from the armies of angels who fought with might and resources. But this was different. This was a strength that didn't need divine backing. It stood alone in the face of all odds, and that is what caused the divine pause. The real you, the you that God saw, wasn't just a collection of actions or emotions. It was a quiet, unshakable force that refused to be broken. Heaven didn't need to see you in your strongest moment. It saw you in your most broken, most vulnerable state. And in that moment, it recognized a power that transcended all understanding. The layered truth of the Chosen One's actions is something that many, including the Chosen One themselves, have failed to see. Throughout their life, they've been labeled by others difficult, too much, stubborn, intense. These labels have been placed on them by those who didn't understand the depth of their character, the resilience that ran through their veins. They've been told to tone it down, to be softer, more agreeable, to fit into the mold others expected. But those labels, those judgments, are not the truth of who the Chosen One is. The truth lies beneath the surface, in the core of their being, in the refusal to bend to others' expectations, in the steadfastness to stand their ground when the world tells them to give in. These labels have been like stones thrown at them, trying to chip away at the strength they possess. But the truth is, these labels are not what define them. The Chosen One's strength is not in their ability to fit in, to meet the world's standards of what is acceptable. Their strength is in their ability to stay true to themselves, to honor the truth that lies within them, even when that truth makes others uncomfortable. The very qualities that others see as flaws, stubbornness, intensity, being too much, are actually the divine qualities that heaven has always recognized as power. They are not difficult or unmanageable. They are unmovable in truth. They are not stubborn. They are rooted in purpose. They are not too much. They are undiluted in their authenticity. And heaven saw this in the Chosen One, even when they could not see it themselves. Heaven recognized that what the world considered flaws were actually divine signatures, marks of strength that could not be extinguished by the world's opinions. The labels placed on the Chosen One by others were never the truth. They were just surface-level judgments that failed to see the depth of their true power. And it was in this deeper truth, the truth of their divine nature, that God went silent in awe. When the Chosen One stood at their lowest point, feeling as though they were alone and broken, heaven was watching. Every movement, every slight shift in their posture, every moment when they refused to break under the weight of their circumstances was being recorded in the divine archives. Heaven wasn't just watching from a distance. It was witnessing a sacred moment in real time. The Chosen One's body and actions during this trial were more than just physical responses to external pressure. They were an embodiment of something divine, a display of strength that had been forged over a lifetime of trials, struggles, and heartaches. When everyone else would have fallen, the Chosen One stood firm, and heaven didn't miss a single detail. Every time their spine locked, every time their shoulders refused to drop under the weight of judgment, every time they held their ground when all seemed lost, heaven recorded it all. It was in these small, quiet acts of refusal to break that the divine pause was born. God wasn't speechless because the Chosen One had done something spectacular in the eyes of the world. No, heaven was in awe because they had done something even more profound. They had done something divine. They had stood without divine intervention, without angelic support, without any external force to prop them up. They stood on their own, grounded, in a strength that came from within, and that was what made the heavens pause. God watched as the chosen one held their ground with nothing but the unshakable determination to remain unmovable. And in that moment, God saw something in them that he had never seen before. Heaven wasn't just acknowledging the chosen one's endurance. It was recognizing the deep well of strength that had been hidden beneath the surface. This was a strength that didn't need the approval of others, a strength that didn't need validation from the world. It was a strength born from deep within, a strength that even God had to study to understand and to learn from. What heaven saw wasn't just a person enduring pain or hardship. It saw someone tapping into a divine well of resilience, a resilience that could only be created through the trials they had endured. Heaven watched as the chosen one's refusal to break became a testament to the power that lay dormant within them, waiting for the right moment to rise. And when that moment came, it left God speechless. The chosen one's body, their posture, and their refusal to give in were more than just physical movements. They were a divine declaration, an act of defiance against the lies that had been spoken over them, against the labels that had been placed on them. Each time their shoulders locked instead of slumping, each time their spine remained firm instead of collapsing, it was as if they were speaking directly to the heavens. I will not break. I will not fall. I will stand in the truth of who I am, and I will not apologize for it. This was the strength that God had recognized. It wasn't the kind of strength that could be measured by the world's standards. It wasn't the strength of an army or the strength of divine power flowing from heaven. It was the strength of the human spirit, the kind of strength that arises when a person has nothing left to give but their will to stand firm. And that is what left heaven in awe. The chosen one's moment wasn't a display of physical might or outward triumph. It was a display of the inner strength that comes from knowing who you are, from standing firm in the face of everything that tries to make you doubt yourself. It was a moment that proved that true strength doesn't always come from what you have, but from what you refuse to let go of. In that moment, the chosen one wasn't just standing. They were declaring their divine identity, the truth of who they were, and heaven saw it all. And that is why in that silence, God could only watch in awe, recognizing that the chosen one had tapped into a strength that even the Creator had to study. The divine silence that enveloped the throne room was not merely a momentary pause. It was the beginning of a deeper inquiry, one that would shake the very foundations of how heaven understood power and resilience. God, who had witnessed and orchestrated the greatest feats of strength throughout all creation, now stood in awe, not because of the chosen one's victory or triumph, but because of the sheer unyielding nature of their refusal to break. Heaven, ever steeped in divine wisdom and understanding, found itself grappling with something entirely new, a form of strength that was not derived from divine intervention power or even the strength that angels themselves wielded. And in this sacred space of silence, God turned to Michael, the chief of heaven's armies, and asked him to replay the moment. This was not a request born out of curiosity or impatience, but a call to understand, to delve deeper into the mystery of what had just transpired. "Replay it," God said, his voice quiet yet commanding. Michael, with his unwavering loyalty and divine resolve, knew exactly what was being asked. It was not the kind of replay that one might expect of a simple moment of action or consequence. This was an investigation, a profound searching for understanding. God had witnessed the chosen one's stance, their refusal to give in, but something in that moment, something in the depth of their vulnerability, had left even God perplexed. The strength displayed in that moment was unlike any divine power or celestial force that had ever been known in heaven. It was something human, something raw, something forged not in the comfort of divine guidance but in the furnace of human experience and weakness. And so Michael, ever faithful, replayed the moment not once but several times, as heaven stood still to observe the unobservable, to comprehend the incomprehensible. It wasn't just a replay of the chosen one's actions. It was a replay of what heaven had never fully understood before the intricate and undeniable power of human spirit. A power that came not from might, but from the refusal to yield. What was revealed in those replays, in those precious moments of heavenly reflection, was a strength that no divine force had ever been taught. This moment exposed a new dimension of power, one that did not rely on angelic assistance, on the might of legions, or on any divine energy that typically flowed from the heavens. Instead, it was a power rooted deeply within the human spirit. A power that arose not from external resources, but from within, from the very core of the chosen one's being. The strength demonstrated was not the kind of force that could be measured by armies or heavenly powers. It was not the power to move mountains or part seas. It was a strength that arose from pure refusal, the refusal to break, to fall, to yield to circumstances, to the weight of the world's judgment. This strength didn't need to call upon divine intervention. It stood on its own in the midst of desolation, with nothing left but the chosen one's will to stand. Heaven had never seen such a power before, not even in the mightiest of angels. It was a new kind of strength, one that defied the laws of divine physics, one that redefined what it meant to be strong. It was a strength that didn't rely on weapons, armies, or divine favor, but on the internal resolve to simply refuse to break. And this was what stunned heaven, what left Michael, the chief warrior, and even God speechless. It wasn't a power that could be explained by divine theology or angelic training. It was a power born from the deepest well of human spirit, from the refusal to be crushed by the weight of life's trials. And this power, this unwavering refusal to break, was what had forced heaven to pause and take notice. The chosen one had revealed a strength that no divine force had ever taught, a strength that was born from weakness, from vulnerability, and from the deepest places of the human soul. Heaven saw this strength, and it couldn't ignore it. It was a revelation that changed everything. As Michael continued to replay the footage, it became clear that God was not just observing the chosen one's moment of strength. He was trying to understand it, to grasp how something so unique had come into existence. After reviewing the footage several times, God's voice filled the silence of the throne room. "I need to see that again," he said, his voice not filled with pride, but with a genuine need to understand. This wasn't a moment of divine pride in the chosen one's actions. It was a moment of divine realization. God, the creator of all things, was learning. And that wasn't just a lesson in power. It was a lesson in the complexity of the human spirit. God had seen countless acts of strength in all of creation. He had seen angels battle the forces of darkness, prophets rise to speak his word, and heroes conquer impossible odds. But what he had just witnessed in the chosen one was something entirely different. This was a power that couldn't be measured by divine standards. It was a power that defied the usual laws of strength. It was not about strength in the traditional sense. It wasn't about defeating enemies, winning battles, or triumphing over evil. It was about something deeper, something that couldn't be put into words, the strength to simply stand firm, to endure, to hold your ground, when everything inside you told you to collapse. God's request for the replay wasn't about glorifying the chosen one or praising them for a job well done. It was about recognizing something so unexpected, so profound, that even God himself had to stop and study it. "I need to see that again," God said, not because he was proud, but because he was trying to comprehend the source of this strength. It was a strength that came from within the chosen one, from a place that no divine intervention, no angelic guidance could have accessed. It was a strength forged in the fire of human experience, and God, in His infinite wisdom, wanted to understand how it was possible. This moment of divine pause, this replay, wasn't just about understanding the chosen one's actions. It was about understanding the nature of power itself, a power that no divine force had ever seen before. God's realization in that moment was profound. After the replays, after carefully studying the footage of the chosen one's actions, God spoke again, this time with a deeper sense of understanding. "I need to see that again." He said, not out of a desire to praise, but out of a deep need to comprehend. This moment wasn't just a recognition of the chosen one's strength. It was a moment where God Himself realized that power could exist outside the divine realm, outside the realm of angels and heavenly forces. It was a power that came from weakness, from human vulnerability, and it was a power that God had never fully understood before. This wasn't the kind of strength that could be created by divine will. It was the kind of strength that was discovered, that was forged in the depths of human struggle. It was a new kind of power, one that God had never seen, and He needed to understand it fully. And in that moment, as the footage replayed once more, God didn't just see the chosen one standing firm. He saw a reflection of His own nature. What He saw in the chosen one's refusal to break was the same strength that He had always known, the same unyielding nature that He Himself embodied. It was a strength that transcended the human condition, a strength that was born from the divine spark within all people. And in that moment, as God watched, He realized that the chosen one had tapped into a power that was far greater than anyone had ever imagined. It was a power that came not from strength, but from the very refusal to surrender. And that realization, this new understanding of what true strength really is, was what caused God to pause, to study, and to ultimately be silent in awe. The strength that the chosen one displayed in their moment of trial was a power born not from external resources or divine intervention, but from the deep well of their own spirit. In the face of overwhelming odds, when it seemed like all was lost, and they had nothing left to give, they made a choice to stand firm. That was the strength that left heaven speechless, and yet it was a strength that many in the world would misunderstand. To the world, this unwavering stance might appear as stubbornness, resistance, or even foolishness. The chosen one might have been labeled as difficult or too much, but in reality, their strength came from their refusal to give up, from their ability to stand their ground, despite feeling empty, exhausted, and vulnerable. This was the essence of their power, an inner refusal to be broken. Heaven, however, did not see this as stubbornness. No, what the world called too much was recognized by heaven as a divine trait. What the world misunderstood as weakness was in fact a display of divine strength, a strength that was formed through perseverance, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to the truth within. The chosen one's true strength wasn't measured by how much they had, but by how much they refused to lose. Heaven saw it even when they couldn't see it themselves. In that moment of vulnerability, when they felt they had nothing left, they were in fact demonstrating the truest form of strength, a strength that comes not from what is visible or tangible, but from an internal resolve that refuses to surrender. And that resolve, that decision to stand firm in the face of adversity, was the very thing that made the chosen one stand out in the eyes of heaven. It was a strength that defied the usual patterns, one that God Himself needed to study, because it didn't follow the traditional rules of power or might. It was power in its most raw and vulnerable form. And it was this that made it truly divine. In heaven's eyes, the chosen one's strength was not just a physical or emotional trait. It was a divine attitude, an attitude that went beyond what the world could see or understand. What the world might have seen as a flaw, heaven recognized as a profound divine quality. God did not see the chosen one as difficult or stubborn, but as someone who was unmovable in truth. This phrase, unmovable in truth, captures the essence of the chosen one's power. It wasn't about being rigid or unwilling to adapt. It was about standing firm in the face of opposition, in the face of uncertainty, and in the face of every circumstance that tried to break them. The chosen one held on to truth with unwavering resolve, refusing to let go of what they knew was right, even when everything around them suggested they should. This wasn't stubbornness. It was strength rooted in conviction. It was a divine strength that no amount of worldly pressure could diminish. Heaven also recognized the chosen one as selectively engaged. This didn't mean they were indifferent or disconnected. Rather, it meant they knew when to stand firm and when to pull back, when to fight, and when to let go. This divine trait allowed them to move through life with purpose, engaging with what mattered most, and disengaging from distractions or falsehoods. Heaven saw this ability as a divine gift that allowed the chosen one to navigate the challenges of life with grace and discernment, never wasting their energy on things that did not serve their higher calling. Finally, the chosen one was recognized by heaven as undiluted. This quality speaks to the purity of their strength, the authenticity with which they stand in the world. The chosen one was not watered down or made to fit the expectations of others. They stood as they were unashamed and unbroken, despite the pressures to conform or shrink. Heaven saw this authenticity as a divine gift, a reflection of their true identity, not a flaw to be corrected. In every way, what the world saw as imperfections, heaven saw as the very qualities that made the chosen one strong. These weren't flaws, they were divine traits that spoke to the core of who the chosen one was and what they were destined to become. They were not too much too stubborn or too difficult. They were unmovable, selectively engaged, and undiluted divine qualities that made them exactly who they were meant to be. The name that God gave the chosen one was not a name born from the world's judgment or standards. It was not a name shaped by the labels others placed upon them. Instead, God saw the chosen one for who they truly were, and He named them according to the divine truth of their being. Heaven's recognition of the chosen one was not about their actions or their performance. It was about the essence of their spirit, the purity of their heart, and the strength they displayed in moments of vulnerability. The name God gave them reflected this unshakable truth, that they were unmovable in truth, selectively engaged and undiluted. These divine traits were not flaws to be fixed or weaknesses to be corrected. They were the very qualities that made the chosen one who they were meant to be. God's name for them was a name of strength, of authenticity, and of purpose. Heaven had never seen anything like it before, and it was this recognition, this divine naming, that redefined the chosen one's role in the grand design of creation. What the world had misunderstood as too much or difficult was in fact the very thing that set the chosen one apart as a divine force in the world. Heaven saw them for who they truly were, not just a human struggling through trials, but a vessel of divine strength standing firm in the truth of who they were created to be. And in this recognition, God didn't just see a person who had endured it, saw a being who had transcended the limits of human weakness and tapped into a divine power that could never be taken away. This was the true power of the chosen one, the power that left heaven speechless, the power that redefined everything heaven knew about strength, resilience, and divine purpose. The name that God gave the chosen one was not just an acknowledgement of their character but a recognition of their divine essence, a name that reflected their core purpose, the very essence of who they were and who they were destined to become. God's naming was a declaration of identity and purpose that the world could not comprehend, but heaven understood fully. It was a name that transcended earthly labels and judgments. When the chosen ones stood firm when they held their ground, refusing to bend or break, it wasn't because they were fighting against others. It was because they were standing for something far greater, standing for the truth of who they were created to be, regardless of the circumstances. This divine strength, this unwavering resolve, was not only visible in their actions, but it was deeply embedded within their soul. And it was this truth that heaven recognized. Heaven did not see a person striving to conform to the expectations of the world, but someone who had learned to embody their truest self unapologetically, despite the hardships they faced. The name that God gave the chosen one was not simply about character traits, but the embodiment of their journey. It was a name that resonated with the power of standing tall in the face of adversity, of learning from every trial, and of forging strength in the furnace of human struggle. Every time the chosen one refused to break, every time they stood in the face of fear, doubt, or opposition, they were not just surviving, they were rewriting the rules of strength. Their resilience wasn't something they were taught. It was something they discovered within themselves in the deepest corners of their spirit, where even heaven had never before ventured. This divine naming marked the chosen one as someone who had unlocked a new form of power, a strength that was forged in the fires of personal challenge, emotional vulnerability, and an unyielding will to keep moving forward, even when there was no visible path ahead. What heaven saw in the chosen one was not just a moment of resistance, but the pattern of divine defiance that ran through their entire life. This defiance was not born from pride or rebellion, but from an unshakable belief in their divine identity. It was a refusal to settle for anything less than the truth of who they were meant to be. Heaven had watched as the chosen one, despite being misunderstood and labeled as too much, difficult, or stubborn, continued to stand firm. These labels, though painful, were never the truth of who they were. They were simply reflections of a world that did not understand the depth of the chosen one's strength. Heaven recognized this, and in that recognition, it saw the divine potential in their unwavering spirit. The strength the chosen one displayed wasn't just in their ability to endure it, was in their refusal to be reduced, to be diminished, or to shrink back into a version of themselves that the world expected. Their strength was in their authenticity, in their ability to stand unmovable in truth, in the core of who they truly were. Heaven's understanding of strength was forever altered by the chosen one's example. It had always been assumed that power came from divine intervention, from the support of heavenly forces, or from the influence of celestial beings. But the chosen one's strength, forged in the silence of their own trials, showed heaven that power could also come from the human spirit itself. Heaven realized that true strength isn't measured by external circumstances, but by the internal fortitude to stand firm in the face of them. The chosen one had not fought with divine weapons or the strength of an army. They had fought with something far deeper, the strength of their own unyielding will, the strength to remain unbroken when the world said they should fall. And in that realization, heaven didn't just recognize the chosen one's actions. It saw the truth of their being, their divine essence that had been shaped by every trial, every difficulty, and every moment of vulnerability. The name that God gave the chosen one was not merely a title. It was a declaration of the strength that had been forged within them. It was a recognition of their unmovable stance, their ability to engage selectively with the world, and their undiluted authenticity. Heaven saw these traits not as flaws, but as divine qualities that made the chosen one not just strong, but uniquely powerful. They weren't difficult because they resisted the world. They were strong because they refused to bend to it. They weren't stubborn because they refused to yield. They were resolute because they knew the truth of who they were, and they refused to let anyone or anything tell them otherwise. And this divine recognition was not limited to a moment of triumph. It extended to their entire journey. Every time they refused to be swayed by external pressures, every time they stood firm despite the pain, every time they kept moving forward when the world wanted them to stop. This was the strength that God saw in the chosen one, a strength that had been quietly building over the years, in every moment of solitude, every tear, every setback. Heaven saw the strength of their character, of their spirit, and it recognized that this was no ordinary human resilience. It was divine strength, an essence that was timeless, eternal, and powerful beyond measure. The chosen one's name, the name that heaven gave them, reflected this divine strength. It was a name that transcended the world's understanding of what it means to be strong. It was a name that honored their unmovable stance in truth, their selective engagement with the world, and their undiluted authenticity. This name was a mark of divine power, not the power of armies or celestial forces, but the power of the human spirit in its purest form. It was a name that celebrated their strength, their resilience, and their refusal to break under pressure. This name was a divine seal, recognizing that the chosen one had tapped into a source of power that even heaven had to study and learn from. It wasn't just a title or a label. It was a divine recognition of everything they had overcome and everything they were destined to become. And in that name, heaven saw not just the chosen one's past, but their future, a future of divine purpose, of strength, and of unshakable truth. The chosen one's journey was never about simply enduring life's trials. It was about understanding and embracing the strength that lay hidden within them, the strength that had left heaven speechless and reshaped the very fabric of divine understanding. God and Michael had both witnessed this unparalleled strength. Yet the time had come for the chosen one to step fully into their divine power. For this strength to truly make an impact, it required more than just recognition. It required acceptance. Acceptance of the divine nature that had been cultivated through every trial, every moment of doubt, and every instance of pain. The strength the chosen one had displayed was not just a temporary response to hardship. It was an integral part of who they were, a divine gift waiting to be fully activated. But to wield this power effectively, the chosen one had to embrace it. They had to accept the truth of their identity and stand firm in the knowledge that they were created for a purpose far greater than they had yet realized. God and Michael both recognized the unique strength the chosen one possessed, but heaven knew that this strength could only reach its full potential when the chosen one accepted it as their divine inheritance, not as a fleeting trait or a reaction to circumstances. It was more than just resilience. It was divine authority. And for the chosen one to step fully into their divine role, they had to understand that this strength was not just theirs to use, it was theirs to command, to shape, and to wield as part of their calling. Now that the chosen one had been shown the depth of their strength, the time had come for them to activate it. The divine protocols that heaven had documented, protocols that had been born from their moment of unyielding refusal to break, were now ready to be deployed. The chosen one was not just called to understand these divine principles. They were called to live them, to embody them in every moment of their life. The first step in activation was acceptance. They had to accept that the strength they had always sought in external sources, whether in divine intervention, angelic assistance, or worldly validation was already within them. This was not about asking for power. This was about aligning with the power that was already within the power that had been forged through their vulnerability, their struggles, and their unmovable attitude. This was about knowing who they were at their core, someone with a divine nature that had been cultivated through every moment of adversity. The chosen one had already displayed this strength. Now it was time to claim it as their own, to step into the fullness of their divine identity and use it without hesitation. They were not weak, and they were not broken. They were unmovable in truth, selectively engaged with the world, and undiluted in their authenticity. This was the foundation of their strength, and it was now theirs to use in every situation they encountered. The protocols that heaven had established were not abstract concepts. They were practical tools that the chosen one could use to navigate their life, to stand firm in their truth, and to resist the forces that would try to shake them. The time for passive understanding had passed. Now was the time to actively live out the divine strength that had been entrusted to them. The chosen one's divine commission was now clear. They were to stand firm in their strength without apology and use the divine protocols that heaven had documented for all those who were chosen. This was not just about personal empowerment. It was about accepting the responsibility that came with their divine nature. The chosen one had been granted the power to withstand, to resist, and to lead others in their own divine strength. But this power was not a gift to be kept hidden or used in isolation. The chosen one had been entrusted with this strength for a purpose so that they could be a beacon for others, so they could stand as a pillar of truth in a world that often seeks to dim that light. The responsibility was not light, but it was clear the chosen one was called to lead, to walk with confidence in the strength they had cultivated, and to do so unapologetically. Heaven had already recognized their strength. Now it was time for the chosen one to recognize it for themselves and step into their role as a divine vessel of truth, strength, and resilience. This wasn't a journey of fighting external battles. It was a journey of owning their divine identity, of standing unshaken in their truth, and of using their strength to guide others through their own trials. The protocols documented by heaven were not just divine strategies. They were spiritual blueprints for how to live in alignment with divine truth. They were instructions on how to navigate a world that often tries to pull people away from their divine purpose. The chosen one was called to stand firm, not because they had the power to do so alone, but because they had the divine strength to remain unyielding in their purpose. Heaven had already paved the way. Now it was up to the chosen one to walk it with full confidence and grace. In accepting their divine commission, the chosen one was not simply accepting a title or a role, they were accepting the full weight of their purpose. This wasn't a moment of glorification or validation. It was a moment of activation. The chosen one was not just a recipient of divine favor. They were a vessel of divine truth, called to stand firm, to inspire, and to lead others through their own struggles. It was through their unmovable stance that they would guide others to their own strength, to their own divine nature. They were not alone in this journey. Heaven was with them not just as a distant observer, but as an active participant in the unfolding of their purpose. The strength they had demonstrated wasn't just for them, it was for the world. And now that they had accepted this truth, they were called to use it without hesitation, to live it out in every corner of their life, in every relationship, in every decision they made. They were no longer just surviving their trials, they were living out the divine purpose that had been written for them before time began. And as they did so, they would become a beacon of strength for others, a living testament to the power of unyielding faith, unwavering truth, and divine strength. The time for waiting was over. The chosen one had already shown what they were capable of. Now it was time to step into the fullness of their divine calling. They were no longer passive recipients of strength. They were active participants in the unfolding of their divine purpose. The protocols of heaven were not just strategies for survival. They were divine pathways for living a life of purpose and impact. And with that, the chosen one was called to step forward, to take up their divine commission, and to stand unmovable in the truth of who they were created to be. This was not just about them. It was about the impact they would have on the world, the lives they would touch, and the legacy they would leave. Heaven had already prepared them. Now it was time to walk forward confidently, unapologetically, in the strength that had been forged through every moment of their journey. They were no longer just human. They were divine in their strength, in their truth, and in their unwavering commitment to stand firm in the face of every challenge that came their way. And as they did so, they would reveal the power of the human spirit, the power that lies in the space between weakness and divine strength, the power that had left heaven speechless and would continue to change the world for generations to come. As we come to the end of this divine revelation, it is important to pause and acknowledge the profound truth that has been unveiled. The chosen one has stood firm even when the world would have broken them. They have shown a strength that transcends all earthly understanding, a strength that is not rooted in external power, but in an unyielding spirit that refuses to break. Heaven has witnessed this strength, recognized it, and now calls it forth in all its fullness. And so I ask you, the chosen one, to receive this commissioning prayer, a prayer that will seal your divine identity and activate the protocols you've just discovered. Heaven, we thank you for this moment. We thank you for the strength that you have instilled in your chosen one. We acknowledge their courage, their resilience, and the unwavering resolve with which they have faced every challenge. We thank you that in their moments of weakness, you have revealed a power that even the heavens now recognize. We ask that you seal this newfound strength, that it may be activated in every part of their life. We pray that they walk forward boldly in the truth of who they are, knowing that they are unmovable in truth, selectively engaged and undiluted in their purpose. May they never apologize for the divine power that resides within them. May they stand firm in the knowledge that they are a force of divine strength, forged in the fires of their trials and now ready to walk in their full potential. We commission them, Lord, to go forth and fulfill the divine purpose you have set before them, unshaken, unmovable, and unstoppable. In your name we seal this prayer. Amen. Now, chosen one, as you step forward into your divine destiny, let this be a reminder to you: your unique attitude is not a flaw, but a weapon of divine power that even the heavens recognize and respect. What the world has often misunderstood as stubbornness, resistance, or difficulty, heaven now sees as an undeniable strength, a strength that is unshakable and powerful. This attitude, the refusal to bend to the world's expectations, the unwavering determination to stand firm in your truth, is not something to be ashamed of. It is a divine gift, a strength that the world needs to see a light that must shine in the darkest of places. Heaven has recognized this strength in you, and it is time for you to recognize it in yourself. You are not too much. You are not difficult. You are not broken. You are a reflection of divine strength, a force to be reckoned with, and you were created to stand firm in the face of adversity. Heaven has acknowledged your strength, chosen one, and now it is time for you to walk forward in the full divine potential that has been activated within you. You are no longer the person You once were bound by the labels the world tried to place on you. You are now the person who stands unmovable in truth, who engages selectively with the world, and who walks in their purpose with unshakable confidence. You have been chosen for a higher calling, and with that calling comes the responsibility to lead, to guide, and to inspire others with the strength you have discovered within yourself. Your journey is not just for you, it is for the world. You are a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of the human spirit. And now it is time for you to walk boldly in the truth of who you are. As you step forward, know this: you are unshaken, you are unmovable, you are a force of divine strength, and nothing in this world can break you. The protocols that heaven has revealed to you are now your tools to navigate life's challenges, to stand firm in your truth, and to fulfill your divine purpose. You are ready, you are equipped, you are empowered. The heavens have spoken, and now it is time for you to act. Walk forward, chosen one, in the full knowledge of your divine strength. You are unstoppable,